We're tracking something really interesting going on right now. It's a surge in voter registration in key groups ahead of the November election. Among young black women, registration is up more than 175%. You heard that right, more than 175% in 13 states. That's compared to the same time in 2020. This, according to the data firm TargetSmart. Registration has also increased among young Latinas and black Americans. Tom Bonnier joins us now. He's a senior advisor at TargetSmart. Tom, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming in. 175%, can that possibly be right? You must have triple-checked this or many more times than that.
You're right to repeat the number because I've more than triple-checked it. It's incredibly unusual to see changes in voter registration that are anywhere close to this. I mean, to remind people, 175% is almost tripling of registration rates among this specific group. You just don't see that sort of thing happen in elections normally.
Those numbers are astounding, aren't they? That report, over 100% of new registrations in young black voters, women especially, just staggering numbers. The guest there on the show really lays it out. This is just unheard of. This is all from the switch from President Biden to Vice President Harris, the addition of Governor Tim Walz to the campaign, the enthusiasm we've been talking about. I love the way that later in that interview, the guy frames it very well, which is there's very few ways. Polls are sort of intent. Polls are current mood. Actions matter. And we talk about that a lot in the show here. We talk about the poll that matters is the last election, which Democrats have been winning since Dobbs, but also when you talk about voter registration, and that's incredible numbers. And this is working. And there's really a focus on the young voters reaching out to Gen Z and millennials, and there's a reason. It's paying off. Here's a conversation we had a prior guest on here from Next Gen America. Check this out.
How important is it for Vice President Harris to make young voters feel like they are critical in this race?
I mean, in 2020, Biden and Harris won in huge part because of young voters. They turned out in record numbers and voting overwhelmingly to defeat Donald Trump and to elect Biden and Harris. There is no way that she will become President Harris without the youth vote. There's just so many young voters, and now they are energized. It was, I run Next Gen, we're the country's largest youth vote organization. We're in battleground states across the country, and I can tell you from talking to our teams in Pennsylvania and Arizona and Michigan, by Monday morning, our organizers were being flooded by young people saying, I want to register and pledge to vote. And before it, we just didn't have that feel on the ground. And so we're seeing almost immediately a huge surge and boost of energy to young people across the country.
Yeah.
Right. So direct outreach is working, and the Harris-Walz campaign has doing that. If you've heard me on the show talk about the creators, the content creators like me who went to the DNC, they understand that they have to reach out. There's a direct effort to do that, and the enthusiasm is there. Many young people are saying, hey, I want to vote. I want to be part of this. They're volunteering like never before. They've seen a lot. And of course, let's not forget the other guy. And this is one of my favorite clips from recent times. If you remember, this came out, if you didn't see it, during the DNC, Fox News foolishly answered the phone and talked to Donald Trump. And when asked about how he's doing with the youth vote, well, he answered very Donald Trump. Let's check this out.
Let me ask you this, sir. There has been a huge appeal and momentum for women voters. She's trying to pull the youth vote, the Hispanic vote, the black vote back in her direction. Polls show that she's having some success in that at this point. So what are you going to do? What's your strategy to rebuild the momentum that you had with those voters?
No, she's not having success. I'm having success. I'm doing great with the Hispanic voters. I'm doing great with black men. I'm doing great with women because women want safety. They want safety. And they don't have safety when they have somebody allowing 20 million people into our country, many of them very dangerous people. No, it's only in your eyes that they have that, Martha. We're doing very well in the polls. We're leading in most of the polls. And in the swing states, we're leading in almost every one of them.
Mr. President,
Michigan,
let me interrupt.
The auto workers are voting for me because you're not going to have an auto industry if she gets elected. They're going to all electric cars. All electric cars are going to be made in China. And you're not going to have, you literally will not have an auto industry. The United Auto Workers ought to be ashamed of themselves. They sold the workers down the tubes.
Yeah, kind of hustling old Donald Trump off the phone. Kind of get your grandpa off the phone so you can get on with your day. again, they really don't understand. The Republicans are spinning right now. They don't have answers to this hopeful, joyous, forward-thinking campaign that Vice President Harris and Governor Walz are leading. I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about that impact on Gen Z and our young voters. There's no better person to do it than John Della Volpe, my friend. This is the first 3-time guest we've ever had in the show. So let's just get on with it. I'm Fred Wellman, host of On Democracy with FP Wellman, right here in the Midas Touch Network. You are finding us on your favorite podcast platform, maybe even on our channel on YouTube, On Democracy Podcast. Wherever you find us, this is the place. Let's get on with the show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Fred Wellman, host of On Democracy with FP Wellman. You knew that because I said it a minute ago, but here we are again. Look, it's been a crazy time as always in everywhere, from Arlington National Cemetery craziness to people running around like nut jobs. It's been great. But in the meantime, I really want to circle back and talk about what we really, really need to talk about. As in the intro I mentioned, youth voting, voter registration, the gender gap that's growing. I couldn't think of anybody I'd rather have on the show than our first 3-time guest, the first one ever. John Della Volpe is the director of polling at Harvard Kennedy School Institute of Politics, author of Fight, this book right here, How Gen Z is Channeling Their Fear and Passion to Save America. Founder of SocialSphere. John, man, welcome back to the show. 3-time guest, no smoking jacket though, I'm sorry to say.
Okay, well, I need to figure out something else as a token, but this is such an honor, Fred. It's great to be with you. Thank you. At what point do we get a smoking jacket?
I think 5. I think 5 is the tradition. We'll have to create that. We'll get you your own, On Democracy mug. I'm going to create that. We got to get some swag. I'll talk to the Midas Touch guys about me getting some swag. I mean, geez. And by the way, it's our 101st episode, 101st. And you are. So there you go. Hey, so, I missed it at DNC, but you did a new poll. I believe you work with our friends at Voters Tomorrow and others. Talk about the youth vote, the issues around our youth voting. Tell us about this new polling you just put out and what's going on in that sector of our voting.
Yeah, sure thing. A couple big things to always start, Fred, right? Without younger people, Donald Trump is currently the president. Okay. Wow. So let's just circle back just for a minute, right? In terms of 2020. Okay. We're all talking about still, for important reasons, the 3 blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. Yep. And of course, the Georgia and Arizona. Those 5 states flipped. Okay. Trump won those in 2016. So they flipped from red to blue, 16 to 20, because of the younger people. When you look through all the data, you'll find that Donald Trump won the vote of everyone over the age of 45 in each of those 5 states. Trump won, okay? Republicans did something similar in 2022 in the midterms. It was a combination of the record turnout among 18 to 29-year-olds and essentially a 20-point margin across those 5 states that were chiefly responsible, I'd argue, for Biden winning. And what I believe is a better place. Okay. Yeah. So that's kind of where you start. Right. I look at this, at the magic number for Democrats to feel confidence for a popular vote and then electoral college victory to be about 60%. Yeah. Okay. That's the magic number I'm looking at. I released a bunch of polls, technically not working in polling for or with Voters of Tomorrow, right. But I did release kind of my own poll for the battleground states. And what we saw was that tremendous growth and movements for Vice President Harris from early August to later August, from early July to August, double digit, 10, 12, 14 points based upon what questions we're asking. And obviously this incredible enthusiasm across every single demographic group. One of the questions I asked is, with the change of a ticket, with VP being on the top of the ticket, are you more motivated? Are you more excited? And every single group, including younger Republicans, said they were more excited and more enthusiastic about voting because of VP Harris leading that ticket.
Wow. And enthusiasm's a lot. We've been talking about it a lot in the show, that the wave and the enthusiasm, and it matters. Like, I think somebody said it really well, happy campaigns win, right? And the approach that they're taking, this joy approach, this idea of a better tomorrow. Do you think that's making a difference? I mean, I think, and you and I talked about this in previous visits, this generation, I think when we first came out with Fight, we talked about that millennials and Gen Z, they've grown up to the worst things, from 9/11 to the Great Recession to a pandemic. I mean, this has been a generation that's really had to manage some tough things. Does that message resonate well with them, the idea of this joy and this happy warrior approach?
Well, we can see that it is, right? We can see that through data that I look at, from public opinion polling, from the horse race, to kind of the attributes, to the issues that they care about, but also voter registration, and people want to be part of something that they can feel good about, Fred, right? They want to feel good about something. And to me, this is going on our 25th year, if you can believe it, the Harvard Youth. Wow. 25 years, right? We met in the early days.
Yeah, 06. We met in 06.
Right?
Yeah.
And to me, this moment reminds me of a combination of two things. It reminds me of the early days of Obama, 07, 08, when there was joy and there was obviously hopefulness, right? But it also is that there's a focus and there's a determination that I saw firsthand in the days after Parkland. So it's this like steely grit matched with like hopefulness in where we want to go, and that we've got some confidence in ourselves to get there, that I think is in the process of developing. And if it can continue to be nurtured and developed, it's going to be incredibly powerful, I think, in the next couple of months here.
And that nurture, that developing is key, right? And I just say from my own experience, and Biden had started it, but especially since Vice President Harris took over, you've really seen a direct outreach to work with those youth voter groups. We mentioned a couple already, Voters Tomorrow, Next Gen America. There's some really good groups out there, and they're partnering. I mean, I think I rode the bus back to the hotels the last night at DNC with my friend Santiago Mayer and his team from Voters Tomorrow. Do you really see an effort by the Harris team and campaign to tie into the youth vote? We have talked previously, like there was a mistake, for example, in Virginia, I think with McAuliffe on, they didn't wait. They waited the last minute. You're not seeing that this time, are you?
No, and that's makes me feel so great, right? Because very few people were paying attention to the youth vote back when I started this thing, right? So we wanted to kind of elevate the voice of the young people and empower them. And now Santiago and so many others are leveraging their power and their capital to remind elected officials that they win elections based upon how well you do with youth vote. It's not news to VP's team. There's a lot of folks from the Obama team. There's a lot of folks from the Biden team. And obviously she's been plugged in. Her college tour last year, late summer, early fall, incredibly successful. Why? Yeah. Because she didn't go there and lecture people on a college campus. She went there to listen. She went there to listen and to hear their concerns, to internalize their concerns and remind them, as I said on the outset, that the power that they have, that we live in a different and better place because of their participation last time. And she's listening, she's empowering them to do that again. So, but these campaigns and these movements are special, I think, when we have this unique combination, right? We've got the grassroots, the next gens of the world, the voters of tomorrow of the world, from the bottom up. But when they get support, right, from the top down, specifically the presidential campaign, that's when something special can happen. And there are so many examples of that, from responding to the issues, from listening, to also empowering younger people, including some students that I'm friendly with at Harvard, right, to run the social media channels, et cetera. So it's exciting. Yeah,
it's funny. I saw an interview with somebody. They talked about the big change from the Biden social media outreach to the Harris social media outreach, and I think I saw an interview or caught a clip from the guys directing it for Harris. He says, "Well, I got these Gen Z kids. I just let them do their thing." I mean, that's it, right? And I mean, that's where you go, isn't it?
Right, because they're talking like there's no more, I think, qualified person to talk to a younger voter than another younger voter, right? Who has some information, has some passion, and can connect on that level. Because one of the challenges for younger voters is that they need to feel like all this matters, right? That their vote can make a difference. And when another younger person can remind them that we have the first African-American woman on the Supreme Court, right? That despite the horrible, horrible, horrible tragedies of school shootings, we made some modicum of progress, through a bipartisan gun legislation that funds some red flag laws and tries to keep automatic weapons out of the hands of teenagers, right?
Yeah.
So that there is some sort of progress. And when those messages can be communicated peer-to-peer, that's going to be much more effective than, a 30-second ad from somebody who's more distant to them.
Yeah, and of course, a demographic shift at the top of the ticket, in every way possible. Funny thing about us Gen Xers, and I think you're a fellow is a traveler in our generation, is that our generations tend to skew young or skew old, right? And I am the senior class of the Gen X as a 59-year-old. But that's really where Vice President Harris comes from, right? She comes from a more of a skewing younger. I mean, she understands the cultural vibe. She understands the cultural nuances that we haven't seen in a presidential candidate, I think, probably since Obama, I would say, right? Or, going back to Clinton playing the saxophone, right? I mean, it is a unique thing to be able to hook and understand the cultural vibe you're trying to lead, isn't it?
And it's a really astute point, because it's difficult, even on social, everyone talks about social media, but
right, that's all we talk about, yeah.
To pierce those algorithmic bubbles of social media for the non-politicos, for the non-news watchers, right? And as we've talked about before, there's so much anxiety and stress related to politics. A lot of people, there was an NBC Gen Z poll that came out yesterday. I think 37% indicated that they unfollowed political people on social media, okay? Why? I think a lot of it is just to preserve their mental health. It's one of the few things that they can do, right? Yeah. To make themselves less stressful. So the idea is to find other kind of touch points across culture, right? Yeah. That the VP can kind of connect with. So the importance of her cooking videos, right?
Right.
The joy of her dancing, her connection to music and other culture is more important, I think, at this stage, as she's still introducing herself, than we might otherwise recognize, because I think she's reaching a group of folks who try to avoid politics. And if they can connect with her on something other than politics first, see that there's some sort of connection, I think they'd be more likely to open up and listen to her vision for the next 60 days and for the country.
And that makes the most sense. And it's a natural thing. I think one of the things that I've enjoyed, a couple of things happened with Vice President Harris as this whole the Biden changeover kind of unfolded. You saw a lot of people who wanted Biden out, but also wanted an open primary, and we really know what that meant. Open primary meant somebody other than Kamala. And I said from the beginning, if Biden makes his choice, it has to be Vice President Harris first and foremost. But the other part of that was, I even had people close to me say, "Well, I saw her in 2019, and speak." I'm like, this is not the same Kamala Harris that we saw in 2019. This is, as you mentioned, the HBCU tour she did, where there's crowds snaking around the buildings. I saw her speak at the DNC fall meeting, where she was just sitting in a panel or sitting in a chair getting interviewed, had the crowd on their feet 3 separate times. She is a person who has learned and mastered her craft of connecting with people. But then beyond that, I love what you mentioned about the cookie videos. Like the other day, the video in Savannah where they stopped by the bakery. She's just naturally a fun person, if you will, berating her fellow congressman into getting a piece of cake. Come on, you gotta get something sweet, And there's not a person on earth that doesn't relate to that. I think that naturalness can't be undervalued, can it?
No, Fred, and I agree with you. Obviously, she had her struggles in 2019 on her own primary, but and I really felt like she found herself, over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination, of the shooting in Memphis, I think in Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
Supporting the legislators in Nashville. Obviously the Dobbs decision, and she found, I think, kind of her voice. And often often it's usually at the end of a losing campaign when the candidate gives a concession speech and we say, where was that person for the last 6 months?
Yeah.
So I think she was able to kind of find her voice over the last couple of years. Not a lot of people were paying attention though, right?
Right.
You know, I paid attention closely because she was spending time on colleges. And the idea of her, again, listening, internalizing it, and reminding people, frankly, I think a lot of campaign themes perhaps were developed during those early days, right? Because what she would have heard, and she did hear on those college campuses where vice presidents have never really shown up before, right? Those places that she attended, HBCUs, community colleges, some state colleges, et cetera. We heard like concern over basic rights and freedoms, the right to clean air and clean water, the right to obviously reproductive health care, the right to feel safe in a public space or in a school, the right to work really hard and access a quality education or a roof over your head, right? I think those are the messages that she heard. That's what Americans are talking about. That's what younger people are talking about. And the degree to which she can kind of continue that and empower young people to spread that word, you know, she's going to be in really great shape in the next 60-something days.
I love it. And I've got a great place to segue to. We're going to go to our sponsors first. Human and Roan are joined this week. So let's take a brief break for our sponsors and we'll come right back. If you're like me, you understand the pain of finding out what to wear each day. I mean, most clothes I have are uncomfortable, never actually the size I really am, and not to mention how much time is wasted trying to find a good outfit. And when you do have a good fit, you can only wear it for a few hours. We have to change for an important meeting or dinner, find a new outfit. Now, everyone wants to dress well at all times because simply put, it's a confidence booster, even for men like me. Men's closets were due for a radical overhaul and reinvention, and Roan stepped up to the challenge. Roan's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man, and here's why. Roan helps you get ready for any occasion with the commuter collection, which offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, quarter zips, and polos. You've never have to worry about what to wear when you have the Roan commuter collection. With Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long, and on top of that, Roan is 100% machine washable, so you can just ditch it all in the dry cleaner or ditch the dry cleaner completely, put it all in your own washing machine yourself. You know, I'm obsessed with the Roan commuter collection. We're on the move a lot, whether it's I'm catching a flight or I'm going to a meeting or whatever. The Roan commuter collection has never let me down so far. The commuter collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to head to roan.com/Fred, use promo code Fred to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to RHONE.com/Fred and use code Fred. It's time for you to find your corner office of comfort. Check out our sponsor, Roan. I hope you'll buy some outfits today. Look, you follow the show for a while, you know I've been trying to exercise, get it more into my routine. It's so important. It gives you powerful cardiovascular benefits. But I'm not going to lie to you. It's been a challenge to find the energy without turning to more and more caffeine, be it my morning coffee or an afternoon Diet Coke. I knew that supporting my heart health and staying active shouldn't be as much of an uphill battle. We often think living a more heart-healthy life means making big, unsustainable changes. Well, with SuperBeets Heart Chews, you can get daily blood pressure support in just 2 tasty chews a day, and they even promote heart-healthy energy without the stimulants. Pair with a healthy lifestyle, the antioxidants in SuperBeets are clinically shown to be nearly 2 times more effective at promoting normal blood pressure than a healthy lifestyle alone. Now look, as I mentioned, I used to rely on coffee for energy, but the jitters and crashes were just too much sometimes. SuperBeets Heart Chews give me the energy boost I need in the morning, and I stay focused and productive all day long. Plus, honestly, they kind of taste great. They really do. Double your potential with SuperBeets Heart Chews. Now, get a 30-day supply of SuperBeets Heart Chews on all bundles and 15% off your first order by going to getsuperbeets.com and using code FRED. That's getsuperbeets.com, code FRED. Thanks for sponsoring the show, SuperBeets. We appreciate you. So let's talk about the second half of this thing, because one of the things you and I did talk about this week is the Walz effect, right? I mean, we've got America's dad. Right? I mean, it's a similar thing. I mean, I think, and I'm lucky because I have family in Minnesota, and I've been kind of watching Governor Walz, and then I knew him. I'm very blessed that I knew him when he was on the House, the Veterans Affairs Committee. You know, if you remember my previous life, I was a veterans advocate, right? So I remember being disappointed, the feeling of disappointment many of us had when then Representative Walz stepped down and ran for governor. I mean, there was really a sense of loss in Washington, right? from him leaving D.C. And that for us now, here we are 8 years later, whatever, 6 years later, and we're seeing it. But so a lot of people are kind of seeing the Walz effect. So in your world, as you've done the polling, and of course who you talk to, is there a Tim Walz effect too with these younger generations?
I think there is, and I think it's got a lot more upside, Fred. It's funny. I had previously scheduled focus groups in Minneapolis.
Oh, wow.
The day after he was selected. Okay. By the
timing's
way,
everything, right?
It's for a documentary on Gen Z. It's called The Power of Z. It's coming soon. Okay, so
we're looking for it.
We'll share that.
Your fourth time on the show, but go ahead.
At the end of it, okay, at the end of our session, and we had Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, like 15, 18 or so, okay? And I asked them, what do I need to know, and what should other people need to know about your governor, okay? They weren't prepared, and we just kind of went around the group, and it was striking. And this is what I heard. I heard that they should know that next year in Minnesota, I believe, you have access to free college, okay, for all young Minnesotans who qualify, one, okay? Second is that reminded me of the school lunch program, okay? Third, they reminded me that, and this was kind of special, right? And he's just a guy. And what they meant by that was he doesn't have a large stock portfolio or other investments. In other words, 2 points. One is they didn't feel like he could be influenced, one. But secondly, they felt they could connect with him because likely has some level of economic instability, without that sort of nest egg, just a guy, okay?
Right.
And then the other point was that they were very proud of him being a football coach, and the young man said, listen, you're not a high school football coach for money or for fame, right? You're doing it because you care about the young men, you care about your community, and you're trying to do something good, right? So like rapid fire, that's what I was getting.
Wow.
And more importantly than those things, which are important to younger people, but the fact that he is able to communicate so effectively, because those are some specific policies, right? As well as his background. To me, those combination of things are going to be powerful with younger people, because we know this emerging gender gap. I think, Fred, you're the one who taught me, not just in Michigan and Wisconsin, but this is a candidate who's going to do his share of work in North Carolina, right? Veteran population, and in Georgia, and perhaps even in Arizona as well, where you've got a significant number of retired veterans. So I think he has opportunity to resonate across virtually every single segment of the electorate that are kind of on the what we might call fence sitters right now.
Yeah, and I love that just a guy thing. It's so perfect, and I think that's what's so interesting is yesterday's big hit was that the picture of his alleged distant relatives in Nebraska saying they're going to vote for Trump, right? And the MAGA guys thought this was a big hit. That look, his own family members they support Trump, and without doubt, I saw so many people, especially of our age, saying, I couldn't relate this guy more. Like, it's like God bless him. I have family members, actual blood family members, who I barely speak to because of politics. We talk about dogs, so it's like, again, I couldn't find a more relatable thing of a guy than, oh, wow, you got distant relatives in different states who are disagree with you politically. It's like, yeah, welcome to freaking America in 2024, right?
Remember, I don't often quote Huey Long. Okay?
Welcome to 2024.
One thing he did say was people want to vote for someone who's just like themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. But then he says, but a little bit better. Okay. Somebody you can relate to, but who actually, served for a quarter century, served in Congress, has been a public servant, governor, et cetera. Right. Yeah. And I think that is such, when we look back at some of the more effective leaders, political and otherwise, I think that's always a quote that I'm reminded of.
Man, it's a great point. It does really symbolize who the Tim Walz we've all gotten to know now these past few weeks. He's just a regular guy who's taken his experience and gone into Congress and gone on to governor and is leading, but still remembers he was a teacher, still jokes about running a lunchroom and understanding that youth. And that, I think, too, that unique aspect of being a high school teacher for 20 odd years. I mean, talk about understanding youth, right? I mean, there is no better way than to, like you said, sit in a lunchroom every day, is there?
Yeah, and understand that what I find in my focus groups, right, that whether you're gay, straight, queer, lesbian, people focused on the same issues in many ways, right? They've got the same concerns. Young conservatives and young progressive people in his classroom had the same concerns, right? So I think understanding that is incredibly important for him, right? But also understanding the unique ways to kind of connect with and talk to different pockets, right, within his classroom. You can't be an effective teacher if you're doing, the same lecture in the same way every single day, right? So understanding kind of the shared goals, that a generation or a nation have, but also appreciating the nuance and the subtleties and the way to connect people. Those are skills, right, that teachers have to really kind of develop to be kind of effective. And obviously, he's done that incredibly, incredibly well.
Yeah, and another thing I want to pull, and we'll move on, is the Gay Straight Alliance work that he did back in the 90s. And there's been a couple of pieces written about how just unique that is, because the 90s was a different time. It's easy to get lost where we are here in 2024. But the fact that the football coach stepped up and decided to be this the teacher sponsor of the Gay Straight Alliance at his high school in rural Minnesota. What I find fascinating about that is it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago. It wasn't something he did recently. This isn't a man who found his feet as a politician, right? Didn't find these issues as a politician. I can't help but think, even talking to my own kids, the idea that he's been in the fight by their side when it wasn't cool, right, is really unique in a modern politician, I think. Don't you?
Yes, and and the thread line is the consistency and the authenticity, right? So, one of obviously the more popular, continues to be the more popular politicians of this era is Bernie Sanders, right? Who is 60-something years older than the average Gen Zer. So why is he popular? It's a combination, yes, of those kind of progressive values, but it's the fact that he's always had those progressive values, and he's been arguing for healthcare as a basic right since he was a mayor of Burlington, Vermont. Almost 50 years. What is it? 44 years ago, almost 50 years ago, right? It's a combination of having the authenticity. You can evolve your positions, right? You can learn and adapt, et cetera. Of course, you need to. People respect that, but it's a consistency in terms of kind of who you're protecting, who you're fighting for. That I think young people really kind of appreciate, because it's not as much of it as we should have in politics today.
And we don't have enough authenticity. So last time, I do want to share, and it is key. In the opening clip, I talked about this, I want to say it was 135% increase in young Black women registering to vote. Since Kamala entered the race. So you mentioned that earlier, the gender gap. There really is a gender gap. New poll came out yesterday, I think, where it shows 54% now women are supporting Kamala versus Trump. Trump is losing the woman vote. How significant is this gender gap? I'm not actually sure we've ever seen one like this, have we?
No, especially among, again, zeroing in on younger voters.
Yeah.
During the Obama era, as an example, there was like a 1 or 2 point gender gap, barely a gender gap.
Yeah.
President Obama was solid among men as well as women. And we've really kind of seen it explode, I think. Some polling has a gender gap pushing 50 points, okay? Wow. Pushing 50 points in terms of, 70, 80% of women versus supporting Kamala, 30 or so percent of men. I don't think it's that dramatic. I think it's still in the 30 point something range.
Yeah.
Okay. 30 something point range, I think, especially in the battleground states.
Yeah.
She has remained and has held the female vote consistently. Biden did actually quite well also, because women more than any other group appreciate like the lack of rights that they have today relative to a few years ago, and who was fighting for that one, right? But there is some concern, there should be some concern about what we're seeing among men. And in the battleground states, I don't think that I think she's underwater with men under 30. I think Trump is winning. There's been a little bit of progress, but not nearly the progress that I think the Democrats need to see to feel confident. It's a lot of time, but I think that's where things are.
That's fascinating, and it is stressful. I mean, I could imagine that's something they're thinking about, obviously, and that's where you deploy, I guess, Tim Walz and others to try and tighten the group up. But it really is interesting to see that growing go. And it's funny. And then let's also talk about, we've talked about Tim Walz and of course Vice President Harris, but let's talk about JD Vance and his apparently hatred for women, and Donald Trump's. I mean, it's not only just that this ticket brings to the table our opponents, and their opponents bring something even worse to the table, right? Almost like a distaste for the women. It seems like, doesn't it?
Well, this gender gap didn't happen, I think, necessarily organically. I think this has been a strategy, right?
Right.
Basically kind of, MAGA Republicans, right? And perhaps Russia and God knows who else, right? And in terms of driving, basically driving a message that Trump as the anti-hero, not a villain, one.
Yeah.
Second is that the conspiracy theories connected to governments not working, not serving kind of your needs too, right? And then third, it could exacerbate it by a campaign focused on a lot of misinformation related to President Biden.
Right.
Okay, so that's not surprise, and it's infested, traditional as well as non-traditional outlets, many places that we don't even see, right? So I don't think that's necessarily kind of a surprise. We talked about this before in terms of the disconnection that younger Democrats, younger people of color have had with the Democratic Party, despite the fact that a lot of their values are more progressive today than they were a few years ago. So this is a systemic challenge that I think needs to be addressed by the Democratic Party soonest. Speaking of JD Vance, I saw this morning, one of the more tone deaf quotes I'd ever seen in a conversation he was having with Charlie Kirk, and he suggested, the question was like the expenses of raising a family, right? And he suggested that for younger families, we both have younger kids who are that age, right? Yep. And I think you've got a couple of grandkids yourself, right? And JD Vance said, one of the main solutions would be just to ask grandma and grandpa to chip in a little bit more, right? In terms of taking the babies while the parents go to work, or the aunts and uncle, okay? That might have been great, 50 or 60 years ago when we all lived on the same block or in the same house, right? Right. But I don't know about your kids. My kids, thankfully they're healthy, they're doing well. They can't afford a house, sadly, the town that they grew up in, and very, very few people can. So as much as we might like to take care of our grandchildren, that may not be an option if our kids are living 100 miles away so they could afford rent or a home. So I think, we can make jokes about him being awkward, right, at a bakery or coffee shop, right? But let's really kind of pay attention to his connection to the challenges that millions of Americans are facing every single day, and to take them seriously. There may be some disagreement in terms of policy, but asking grandma and grandpa, that's not a policy.
No, and it's a fantasy world. I live 1,200 miles away from mine. So, well, with that, John, I appreciate you. I know you're a busy man. Thanks for taking time to be our first 3 repeat guest. And man, keep up the fight. I'm sure we'll be talking to you again. Good luck with that documentary.
Thanks, Fred. See you soon.
See you soon. I love talking to John Della Volpe. You can see he's brilliant. you spent over 25 years studying the millennials, studying the Gen Zs, and now Gen Alpha coming in and their voting patterns, their needs, their issues, and we can see where that's going to play out in this election. The gap is growing between the youth vote and the older vote. The gap is growing between young women and men. It is a very unique time. This election is very unique. We got 7 weeks to go, so there's a lot to do. There's a lot to learn. There are gaps. The Democrats do have weak points. We're not going to act. We don't want to act cocky here. Okay, there's a lot of things that have to be resolved, and a lot of places have to convince still that not to go back. We're never going back to Donald Trump. With that, it's just been great. It's been a great week. Good seeing you guys. I love talking to John. This is our last week. If you heard me mention, I haven't mentioned in quite a while, the Forgotten Democrats. As you remember, if you haven't heard before, I'm the national chairman of Forgotten Democrats. Forgotten Democrats is a very unique organization. We're very simple. We have a unique FEC earmark that allows us to collect money from donors, and it will be split amongst the Democratic nominees for the House of Representatives who need the most money first. So there's no application, there's no humans touching it. We will look at the FEC reports. Whoever has the least amount of money, we will look how much money we have in the bank. We'll raise those nominees up to a certain amount based on what we have available. Well, I'm excited to say we're getting ready in a week and a half to actually issue our first checks. I'm going to start picking up the phone and calling House nominees and Democrats across the country to say, hey, we're sending you X amount of money from our pot of incredible donors. I would love to get more money in the pot. It is our first cycle. It's not a huge amount of money, but we'd like to be able to help. And if you haven't raised a lot of money as a House candidate, a little bit helps a long way, and you can make that difference. So I'm making a little urge here that if you could consider a one-time donation. We're not gonna pummel you with emails. You're not gonna hear from me much. We don't have hardly any overhead. We have like one staffer. I am not getting paid. It's literally an effort simply to fund those Democratic people, nominees running for the House who need money to get out the vote in this last week. Our goal is to get them at least some money to get signs, get out the vote efforts, and really put up a fight across the country, flip the House back to the Democrats, give hopefully President Harris and Vice President Walz a Senate and a House that they can take forward and really make a difference in the country. So we'll put it's a ForgottenDemocrats.org. I'm putting it up on screen. I would love for you to just click on over there. Any kind of donation helps. Every little bit helps. This money will start going out to Democratic nominees for the House of Representatives in the next 2 weeks. And that's it. There's no fancy ads. There's no PAC. It literally is a very simple system. Your money gets split up amongst multiple candidates in a very unique way. So my last pitch to you for Forgotten Democrats this cycle, I would love your consideration for that. And with that, there's a lot going on in the country. I hope you'll keep in touch. We've got new hot seats coming out. I just interviewed a wonderful woman, Lexi Doherty, who's running in Georgia against Mike Collins, an execrable person, and many others. So check those out too, right here in the MySuch Network. We're here every Friday night, 11. Thanks for all you do. Get in the fight, folks. We're only weeks away from the election. Find a way to be a part of it. And it's not enough just to tweet. Get on in that fight. Find a campaign that needs you. We can win this election if we all work together, focused on the objective, which is to put MAGA and the Donald Trump campaign in our past once and for all. And with that, I'm Fred Wellman. We'll see you next week.